Hello, everybody. Adam Parks here with another episode or a LinkedIn Live webinar. Today, I'm here with two gentlemen that do not need any introduction. I've got Mr. Michael Lamm with Corporate Advisory Solutions, and I've got David Williams with Williams and Fudge. How you guys doing today?
Doing great. How you doing, Adam?
It's another day in paradise. I really do appreciate you coming on and sharing some insights with us today on the mergers and acquisitions side of the world. Before we jump into everything, could we just chat real quick and maybe do some quick backgrounds? Michael, starting with you, could you tell us how you got to the seat that you're in today?
Well, Adam, that's a long story, but I'll make it really short. But I got into the M&A world back in the early 2000 period. I was doing technology deals with Israeli companies, and then I moved into after September 11th, started doing a lot of work in M&A and collections, and I've been in it ever since. So it's been a long ride, and now we've broadened, and now we're doing M&A work in healthcare revenue cycle management, the call center and BPO space, and all the technology that supports all these different areas. And we're not just doing M&A, we're doing valuation, exit prep work, helping companies position themselves over a long window of time to get ready for a potential sale.
Well, M&A is a wildly important thing in our industry right now, and just so many different conversations about the acquisition opportunities, about the sales opportunities, and people preparing their businesses. And David, you've gone through a little bit of that as well. Can we start by, maybe talking a little bit about yourself? Tell us your background and how you got to the seat that you're in today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here with you. You do a great job with this, and it's exciting to be on a new platform. And always enjoy learning from Michael. And I'll see if I can throw in something along the way too. But yeah, David Williams. I'm with Williams and Fudge. I've been in the industry now for almost 25 years, and we're a family-owned company. And so I've been around this thing for a while now, and recently went through the chairs with ACA and served as president last year. So I got to see a lot and hear a lot of about the M&A world in the collection space through that process. We did an acquisition with Michael's help here about a couple years ago now, and well, I say we did one. We're almost done with one. That's one of the things that you need to know when you talk about mergers and acquisitions. It can be a lengthy process. It's going to be a lengthy process. But I've also had some experience here recently in the private equity world and some real estate and some other friends that are looking at M&A type, or private equity. I mean, I think that, as we look into space, the collection space specifically, sorry, I'm getting too far down the road there on you, Adam, but
That's all
the
right.
collection space specifically, over these years, I've seen a lot of ebbs and flows of how this is working and how it's not working, frankly. So thanks again for having me here today. Look forward to the chat.
Well, we definitely appreciate you guys coming on. I know that we've been talking a little bit about what's going on in the debt buying marketplace and kind of an increased interest in acquiring businesses. So, Michael, from your perspective, what are you seeing in the marketplace that is driving this desire for mergers and acquisitions?
There's a couple things. One, I'll talk about the one I think that's most interesting is the technology changes. This industry is finally, Adam, after years and years and years, attracting technology investors to a business like this. I remember when I was involved with Israeli technology companies years ago, I never thought in my wildest dreams that we'd be talking to Silicon Valley tech investors about debt collection. I mean, honestly, like it was never something that I had on the front of my head, but it's happening. We've got tech groups that are coming in, interested in trying to put money to work in the space, whether it's with an agency, law firm, debt buyer, or somewhere in between. And then as the other key trend is just the deregulation, with Trump coming in, investors that have been skittish about the space have finally said, things are going to start changing with the CFPB at the state level. Maybe this is a time to jump in. And then you add the technology components to it. It becomes more interesting for folks that weren't looking at it before.
Fair enough. And so, David, as you've looked at the opportunities across the space, and as you're considering how do you continue to scale and grow your company, what have you seen as kind of like an attractant to continuing down the M&A path versus?
Well, I think if you find the right acquisition, helps you scale much quicker, obviously. And I think when you look at the potential acquisitions and what Michael said right, which just now is a big reason why a lot of this is happening on the agency side, is that if you're not keeping up with the technology and you are in a position, an agency's in a position where it's like, okay, well, this is a lot. I mean, I don't know what AI is. I don't know how to do machine learning. I'm not interested in texting, whatever it is. Then it's a time that you need to get out and you need to get out quickly, in my opinion, because one of the things that I've learned through Michael and looking at a lot of different companies is, there's people out there in the agency space that value their work and their years of being in business. And the reality is when they go to sell, a lot of times their business isn't worth very much. And, that's hard for them to hear. It's hard to hear if something you've put your life and your energy into is not, people aren't willing to pay for if it's not producing and if there's not revenue there, if there's not profit there. And so that's one of the things that, we've looked at a lot of companies and some that are like that, where it's just frankly like, well, at this point, it's just really not worth much. And you don't want to offend the potential acquisition, but you're also, you can't pay more than it's worth just because, the person may think it's worth more than that. So
Fair statement. It's finding that balance between what is your company worth and telling somebody that their baby of 30 years is not worth what they thought it was worth is difficult. But there's a lot of things that organizations can be doing to prepare for that in advance. Like you definitely should not be waiting until you're thinking about selling to start thinking about selling. You have to
well
get
said.
your business in line up front, right? It's a
Yeah,
function of the cash flows.
David, but David, like even the deal you did in Texas, you got to know that owner for a long time. It wasn't just somebody, he just showed up at your door and you said, I'm interested. You got to know him. And hey, Adam, it doesn't happen overnight. Relationships get established. There's a comfort zone, a trust, and feeling like you're getting transparency in terms of buying or selling the business. And that goes a long way, especially in an industry like this that's kind of small and closed. You really have to know who's on the other side of the table that you're potentially going to negotiate with.
Fair statement. I mean, how do you start building that relationship though? You just walk up and be like, hey, I want to buy your company 10 years from now. Like, how does that process like actually begin? And what's that first step of a journey of 1,000 miles for someone who wants to be acquired?
For me, it's like an interview. I mean, it's like when we're interviewing internal candidates at Williams and Fudge. I mean, or when you're interviewing or looking for a new employee, you're interviewing someone before they know you're interviewing them. And that's not, I mean, we all do it all the time. And that is as you develop relationships. So, when you're around someone in the community doing something and you say, you know what, this guy is really good at technology, and you start watching them, and then it's like, okay, that's who I want to hire. And I
Mhm.
think it's kind of the same way in the acquisition world, at least for me in a from a relational standpoint. You get to know certain people over the years at industry events or, watching them on webinars or whatever it is. And it's like, hey, that's somebody that I think I would like to work with. And that goes both ways. I mean, when you talk about preparing for selling, I mean, if that happens with us one day, of course, I'm always, looking at, well, if we were to sell our business, who would we sell our business to? Who would we be comfortable with it moving to? In the same way, if for a potential target, a target acquisition of like, hey, she runs a really good shop, and if it comes time where she wants to get out, I think we could take her baby and run with it, so to speak.
I
Yeah,
think that makes a lot
Adam,
of
when you
sense.
don't have a cultural fit, like David described, there's got to be an interest and a fit. Every time we're selling a company, I can't tell you how many times I go through the buyer list with the potential with our clients, and they say, "I'm not selling to that guy or that woman. I'm not doing it." Like I don't trust them. I don't feel comfortable. You could tell me that the best buyer in town, they could give me a boatload of cash. I just don't think I'm going to get there with that individual. And so relationships really matter when it comes to it sometimes takes years in some cases for transactions to ultimately unfold and happen as a result of that relationship being built.
And it seems, Michael, we worked with you a little bit on with our debt buying company as far as the valuation of it and that. And, that does seem a little bit different, Adam. I think, the relational part of that is not quite the same. It's more numbers at that point, right? I mean, because you're talking about accounts that, that you own that you're looking for to move potentially. And a lot of times I think that's more, there's a lot less relational to that. And it really is driven by numbers, I think.
Okay. Is it more these days like whole company purchases or asset purchases that are happening in our current?
Question, Adam. It really it depends, but I would tell you that for some of like the when a larger agency is acquiring a smaller one, as an example, you tend to see more asset type deals because it's easier to fold in, or what we call client lift outs. You lift the clients out and you put them into the bigger company. So we tend to see more asset sales. But in the other hand, like with whenever we're selling a business, let's say it's going to private equity, they're a larger company and they've got, call it 20 million plus of revenue or more, you'll see more stock transactions depending on their structure, easy to transition and ease of people, clients, and everything else to transition the business and
And
licenses.
And yeah, so licenses is an interesting question because I did a podcast with Cornerstone last week talking a little bit about like what does it mean to be buying licenses and is that really a thing or not? And one of the things we talked about was having that holding company over the licensed entity and that being an easier transaction than trying to manage it. Any advice for the audience that thinks about like, well, I'm gonna go buy that company for the licenses?
Adam, I've talked to so many people about
That's why I'm
buying
giving you a
shells.
chance.
I can't even tell you how many calls I get where someone's like, Michael, I need a shell. Get me a shell with a few licenses so I can get started. It's easier said than done. I can't tell you how many are out there where there could be an opportunity or they're in 10 states and they've got it. But as you heard from Cornerstone, it's not that simple. Having the hold co of over top of it is a really important strategy. Also, when you're buying a shell, you're also inheriting a lot of liability. And being in the world of data security and cyber breaches and all the craziness that happens, the concept of buying the shell has become less so versus just doing it organically and setting it up yourself.
Now, are you seeing more mergers and acquisitions these days that are happening industry to industry versus private equity coming in? I know when interest rates were lower and cash was freer, there was a lot of money that was flooding into the marketplace, whether it to be to buy agencies or debt buyers or even to invest in portfolios. But is that external money still flowing in at that same rate? Or is it more guys like David that are trying to consolidate something that they already know and understand?
You're seeing it pick back up. So last year it was more industry to industry. Now we're seeing with deregulation and technology, you're seeing it shift back to where investors, even with interest rates, are seeing our industry as a growth opportunity over the next 5 to 10 years. So if we go into recession, more volume, less collectible potentially, but you layer in technology, which is what we're going to have now that we didn't have in 2008, it could become a game changer in terms of performance and profitability. So you've got more groups coming in from the outside looking at our space than we probably have seen in 5 to 10 years.
We had that exact conversation yesterday related to our agency as far as, preparing for, whatever happens with student loans, Department of Ed, but also, just an increase in accounts potentially because of a recession or whatever you want to call, more account. And so our ability to quickly scale with the technology that we have in place with the portals and the texting and the technology is a whole lot easier to do than it was in 2008, right? Because at that point we were hiring a lot of people and then we were trying to figure out how to properly score the accounts and do all the things. But now it's so much easier to scale up if you've got your infrastructure built appropriately.
So as we talk about this volume of accounts increasing, which I completely agree with. I mean, that's what we saw in the 2024 TransUnion Debt Collection Industry Report. 90% of companies are expecting more volume, but less liquidation, which means that margins are going to get thinner. From a consumer perspective, we're seeing a slide from super prime to subprime in terms of the quality of borrowers. And then let's throw that wild card in the mix, that buy now, pay later wild card that is a giant blind spot for the entire economy right now. So we're seeing that increase, which means that we're going to need more folks. Are we still having the same struggles of attracting and retaining talent that we were having 6, 8 months ago?
Yeah, David, you jump in, you're living it.
Yeah, I mean, for us, not as much. I mean, but I
Okay.
do think there's some regionality to that from talking to other people and talking to friends in the industry. You know, we've had good success hiring people. We're in Rock Hill, South Carolina, right outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. We've had some pretty good success recently hiring and retaining people and been able to be a little more selective in who we keep. You know, for a little while, it was like, I don't want to say this the right way, but it was if we could get someone hired and in a seat, it was like, oh, if someone is in a seat, it's better than no one in a seat, right? But now we're able to really, be a little more selective, and we're doing a good job of keeping people. I think the a little bit of the changes in administration is helping that too. The changing in narrative, I guess, in the country of, look, we need to take care of our debts. We need to take care of our responsibilities. And there's more and more people that want to be part of that solution rather than, be part of the problem. But again, I mean, we're in an area where a lot of people are moving to, the traffic's gotten crazy, get to Charlotte, all of those kind of things. And I think on that note too, working from office seems to be picking up a little bit of steam right now. You know, we're bringing more people back in and just seeing really good results. And people that probably didn't know what they were missing because they were still at home after COVID, right? To be into the workplace, to be around other people, to be out in society and some of that stuff. So, yeah, that's kind of what we're seeing right now.
It's kind of important. I mean, getting everybody back together again is a really great opportunity because last year with the hiring challenges, that meant we had to go to BPO services and self-service technology. And I don't think that there's any detraction from that self-service technology, but I'm interested from an A perspective when you're looking at a acquisition target, for example, is their application stack or their technology stack still a major, let's say, factor in that
Yeah,
evaluation?
Adam, it absolutely is. I mean, just to briefly touch on the labor issue. I mean, I go around the country just like David and Adam, you do, and the biggest issue I ask owners, what are they facing? Labor, labor, labor. I can't find anybody. And it all depends, as David said, regionally, wherever you are, which is why you see so many companies thinking about nearshore, offshore, because they can't find the people that they need to keep and retain here in the US. And till that changes, that's just what it is. That's why if the if we do end up in a recession, maybe the unemployment rate will go up and then there'll be more people to potentially pick from. And more folks will look at it. But technology, Adam, is so critical right now. When we're involved in selling a company, if they don't, if you can very easily tell from their financials, their data and analytics, if they've got the real backbone in place for them to do what they need to do to drive revenue and profitability. And those that are on legacy software, old tech, old solutions that we've seen over the years and years in the space tends to hurt them because the buyer comes in and they look at them and say, my gosh, I've now got to put a few $1 million to upgrade this company to bring it into the 20, and it's gonna be a pain in the neck to do that. So they ding them on the valuation. So that's kind of the where it ultimately goes.
And I mean, he's exactly right, of course. But I mean, we've seen 10 companies like that where it's like, and they're a small size, which would be fine if we could get them implemented quickly, right? But when we see legacy software combined with, a relatively small size, that's a lot of work for not much on the back end, not much revenue on the back end. And so if you're looking at a mid-sized company and it's going to be a significant impact for you, then you're more willing to take that implementation on. But smaller companies with old software, I mean, that's tough.
With Finvise, moving out, their old Cubs is being sunsetted, and you got guys that are sitting there who have been in the industry for 30 years and have been on Cubs for probably the same amount of time, saying, "What am I going to do now? Like, what am I going to go off to a new software platform?" And these are the types of questions we're getting from those owners, like, should I move over to a newer, more modern software that's going to help me when I do go to sell the company? And we're having those conversations about that.
Well, system conversions are a nightmare. I have no other way to say that. Like, it's just a nightmare of a project. And when you look at some of these legacy technologies and the level of customization that's been done to them for a small agency, I think, David, what you're saying makes a lot of sense about I can't attack that for a small organization. Like, it has to move the needle for me from a financial perspective in order for me to take on that. Let's call it, man, I don't even know anyone who's done a system conversion in 6 months. So let's call it a year investment of the IT resources that are necessary to actually do that and to unwind that legacy system to ensure that all of the payments are being posted appropriately, right? And all those customizations are accounted for. And to be perfectly frank, the labor pool that understands those legacy systems, like the available consultants and folks that can actually code those languages and understand the infrastructure, are few and far between these days. There's just not as many people available to assist in that process as there used to be. And there's plenty of
And
people who
you,
understand the new tech.
right.
Yeah.
Right. And you talk about, when you talk about that, I mean, there's some great consultants, but they're going to get you 60, 70, maybe 80% of the way. And you've got to have people on staff that know how to make it happen.
Not only
And
that, but
they're,
the expense.
yeah, yeah.
The expense, but they also have day jobs, right? Like David's team has other things to do other than just figure out legacy technology from 1994 on how it's going to be integrated. It's definitely a major item whenever there's a transaction, how the IT stuff gets dealt with and converted, and it's expensive.
So we've talked about the labor struggles. We've talked about the technology integrations. What's another piece of the puzzle that people really need to be considering as they're preparing their businesses to be saleable?
The number one thing on my list usually is the people that are in the business that have the client relationships. And those people, for the transition over to the new buyer, is it so important. If that individual just wants to go onto the beach in Florida and not really be involved, or there isn't somebody that's secondary to them that's got the relationships, Adam, it matters. I mean, in every area of this business, relationships are critical. And when that individual isn't going to be involved or helpful or doesn't have a team to help support him with the sales and marketing effort to transition the clients, there's usually problems that come up as a result of that.
So we had a question that just came up. It said, why is BTO so important? I'm not sure if they meant,
Oh, beat.
yeah. Janet, you might have to clarify that one for me and I'll
business
get you an answer. Yeah.
technology outsourcing. I don't
Could
know.
be business technology outsourcing. Okay.
David, I like that one. That's
Yeah.
good. That's
Well,
good.
it's not important yet, but it's about to be very important because we
Yeah.
just came up with that. No, I mean, at BPO, I mean, it's a lot less expensive. I mean, frankly, it's just when you're looking at margins that are thinner for so many different reasons. I mean, I think looking at labor in different areas is critical. I mean, and our experiences has been very good overall with, the globes getting smaller and smaller and people are getting with the technology and everything, people are getting and less language barrier, frankly, there's a lot more opportunity for it out there and a
I
lot
would add
easier barrier of entry. And also I think it's more accepted from a client standpoint as well.
temporary knowledge. It's RTO. So we're going to go back to RTO in a second, but I would also stack onto that and say that when we're talking about outsourcing technology teams, for me, it's all about that temporary knowledge if we're talking about a system conversion. Because if I need someone who uses or understands Cubs to convert that data over, I do not need that person for the next 20 years. And versus trying to hire and go through that
Yeah.
whole process of bringing somebody on board, doing that in a temporary standpoint is a little bit different. But when we talk about return to office was something that we were talking about, bringing the people back into the business. So for you, David, like as you're running an operation of your size and scale, what are some of the things that you've identified have been a value add as people have been returning to office?
I think you see, we've seen an improvement of just about everybody that's coming back. And I'm not saying we have everybody back in the office. I mean, we've hired people across the country during COVID and after that we hired on a permanent remote basis. So, as long as they're producing, they're staying there. But our local people coming back in the office, I mean, we're seeing the teamwork come back a little bit. The old school collections of like you're in a row and, Adam's a great collector, you get to hear Adam's talk off, right? I mean, things like that. But the camaraderie, I think it's helped a lot with our retention because I mean, people are here, they're part of the company, they see, our leadership team, feel, they get a pat on the back, not just a, you know, virtual thumb or whatever it is. And there's nothing wrong with that. Look, I mean, again, it's a balance, but I mean, for us, that's where we are. And I've got great friends in the industry that think that there's no reason for that, and that's okay too. But you've seen it in some larger organizations of like, hey, we need to get people in, we need them working, and I think it's job dependent a lot of times too. And another thing is for younger employees, I mean, if you're sitting in your apartment making phone calls or programming something, it's really hard for them to have any type of upward trajectory in their career.
It's harder to upskill people when they're not local, and that's a challenge. I mean, look, almost my entire organization is actually half of my organization is remote. All of our US staff is remote. Our Mumbai office is together and our Bangalore office is completely hybrid. So I'm actually managing 3 different facilities with 3 different methodologies. And I could say upskilling the staff, like my US staff, I don't generally hire people that need to be upskilled, hire people that already have their skill set because I can't upskill them when they're remote. Mumbai office, I'm way more focused on people development because they're sitting, motion creates emotion. And when you're in a room with all of these other people that are having those conversations, that are doing those same tasks, they can learn from each other, they can cross train. I find that to be a very effective methodology. Now for our Bangalore office, it's all software development. So I feel a little bit differently about it. They need to come together. So, a couple of times a week to make sure everybody's on the same track, but they're off coding kind of independently and bringing that code back to the mothership for, evaluation and implementation. So I think what you said, David, about it being dependent on the role and the job is right on point. Some roles probably don't need to be on site, but some really do. Now, going back to the M&A discussion itself, when we're thinking about the organizations, Michael, when somebody's bringing, let's say, private equity money to the table or outside money is coming to the industry, are they looking at the cash flows or are they looking at that long-term value increase as their primary investment objective?
So when they're looking at an agency, they're looking at cash flow or what we call EBITDA or normalized or adjusted EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. They're trying to get a handle on that, but they're not just looking at it for one period of time. They're looking at the last 3 to 5 years of performance and also where it's headed on a go-forward basis. This industry notoriously on the agency side, they're not very good at projecting. It's very hard to project the future. Different than in the debt buying world where you could model it out over a 3 to 5, 10-year window with some really good data behind it. It's just a different approach altogether. But cash flow and EBITDA becomes a very important component for value and how they're going to apply the multiple that they do to the business that they're buying.
So there's 3 things that matter in any business: the cash flow, the timing of the cash flow, and the risk associated with that cash flow. But I agree with what you're saying in that, when we think about debt buyers, it's a little bit different because you're buying an asset pool versus an operation,
It
right?
is. And that's going to get valued completely different than just putting a multiple of earnings on the business. You're going to look at it with their portfolio under management, the platform. It's just whole different ball of wax.
Is that generally done as a discount to future value?
Discounted cash flow analysis
Discounted
is
cash
a
flow analysis.
primary way that the valuations are constructed today.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's similar to buying a performing note. You're just dealing with a different discount,
Yeah.
like a performing pool. That's interesting. Have we seen anything or is there any differentiation when you're thinking about internal industry money, like an internal acquisition within the industry versus new money coming from the outside, or is those evaluations calculated pretty much the same way?
The difference is that when David goes and buys a company, he's also not just he's looking at the company to figure out what the earnings are, but he's also looking in his mind to say, what are the synergies, right? What other ways can I cut away expense? He's not necessarily going to pay that dollar for dollar, but he's going to think about that as it relates to why he's buying it in the first place. So he's looking for IT and client services and payments and other redundancies that's there that he could merge into what he's already got inside of his business that could just be scaled up versus recreated. The investors are coming in looking at it as a platform And that new money is looking at it as, I've got to invest and build something for the future. So they're going to take a different approach to it, and they're not seeing synergy from buying it. They will after they make their first investment when they buy the next one, but not the initial investment.
Has
And I
there
think,
been Go ahead.
well, I think too, I think Michael's spot on. And I want to go back to something he said a little bit earlier. When we're looking at that, one of the scariest prospects is seeing a large client that makes up, over half or the majority of an agency's business when when you're buying it. And that relationship is so critical, right? So the relationship that whoever has with XYZ client that makes up half of, the revenue of the potential acquisition is critical. And what's that person going to do? And what does that client think of an acquisition? I mean, that stuff is really, really key to look at because, and I don't know that private equity looks at that as much, but we know that, and we know that we have to take that into account. And we also know that historically, from an agency side, there's a lot of agencies that are very dependent on one or two clients to keep their doors open.
Well, you bring up a good point. So what's an appropriate balance? Like, what's an appropriate size for your largest
Adam,
client?
look, I've sold companies that have had 70% concentration. I've sold companies that have 3%, 5%. There's a middle ground. 20% is a great number to strive for. When you're above 50%, I don't care what kind of business it is, raises your scrutiny over that relationship. It goes so much deeper. So as an example, if that is a hospital system that they've been working with, that agency's been working with for 20 years. But oh, by the way, the revenue cycle director's retiring next year and they're bringing in a whole new crop of people. These are the types of questions you got to ask because there's a good chance that you buy it and then there's a big change that you're in front of. Now you could structure the deal and figure out other ways to protect yourself, but it still leads to a level of risk. That's why I love to see companies, if they can, if they've got a window of time before they sell, to see if they can get it into the 20s from a concentration perspective for their big client, because it makes a heck of a lot of difference on the value and on the structure of the deal if you get it below that or somewhere in that ballpark.
Interesting. That's great advice. I had another question come through about have you seen any increase in the employee stock option plans, the ESOP conversions versus other types of transitions?
We're talking a lot. There are companies in the space that are ESOP owned, not even completely. They maybe be partial ESOPs. Definitely a big topic. We've been talking to a lot of companies, investors, and lenders about it. Actually, in the debt collection law firm side of the house, we see a big
Really?
opportunity for ESOPs on that side of it because, Adam, you probably know there's just a lot of law firms that are out there with no succession plan or with no junior attorneys that could step up.
Mhm.
And the ESOP could be an interesting option for those looking there. Also on the agency side, but there's been some issues with some agencies that have converted into ESOPs for a variety of reasons. But definitely a trend that we're watching and seeing if we could do something with.
I remember
And
a
with
couple of
any
debt buyers having that structure too, and it not really
Mhm.
working out because it creates some pretty serious complications when you're trying to fund a line of credit.
There you go. That's one of the big issues. But the agency side, there have been a few that have worked out fairly well, and there's been some blowups too. But definitely an area that people are looking.
and like anything, I mean, I've heard good stories and horror stories, just like Michael was saying. And the horror stories mostly come from not being properly prepared or educated on whatever it is you're doing. And, I just can't stress enough if you're looking to sell, looking to buy, looking to ESOP, work with professionals. I mean, Michael is fantastic. There's other people that do this in this industry as well. But I mean, you can get burned real quick. And if you don't know what you're doing and you don't know what the long-term ramifications are of some of this stuff, it's worth the money that you pay a consultant or someone to come in and help you. I mean, 10 times over.
So the next question from the same person was, are you seeing lower multiples on those ESOP transactions than straight
You
acquisition?
definitely can, Adam, and you definitely can. And we're just talking about the fun of client concentration. That's where the ESOPs become interesting because you're getting outside financing to complete to do the ESOP in itself. that outside financing becomes difficult to get if you got a 40 to 50% client concentration and you're getting it at a lower multiple.
A lot of good information here. So one of the things, Michael, I was reading from your CIS newsletter, and I think it was 26.3 billion in transactions in 2024, up from 14.6 billion. I mean, that's a pretty I mean, you must be a busy dude.
I wish that was all happening in our end markets, but they're not. It's,
Okay.
globally, right? Our areas of the industry are, a percent of that, but it's happening and there's more deal activity across the board. I would tell you that a lot of the M&A activity, as you started with, Adam, is interest rate driven. And all this noise with tariffs and everything else doesn't necessarily drive up. It leads to, when you have market confusion, people tend to pause and they try to wait to see what's going to happen first. And so a lot of people are thinking about doing different things or waiting to see what's going to happen with interest rates and what's going to happen with the tariff stuff that we're seeing, and if there's going to be a change there. And I think that's going to be another part of the rest of this year. We're going to start to see, if things be normalized there, then we'll start to see even a bigger pickup in deal activity.
Now, have we seen any movement in pricing between 2024 and 2025? I don't want, we're going to get into the Trump effect here in a minute. What have you seen in terms of pricing trajectory?
You're not seeing pricing on multiple or companies changing dramatically right now because we just left a year of high interest rates. It's not like, interest rates have dropped off and now the multiples are going up yet. So it's been relatively flat. What you are seeing though is people aren't getting any younger. Business owners aren't getting any younger. So they're starting to look at it and say, am I going to do something during the Trump period? Right? Or am I going to wait to see whatever happens after these 4 years? Who comes in after that? And some people are more focused on doing something now as it relates to where they're sitting from a retirement or age perspective. So that's also driving people's interest to do something as well.
And that's important because that happens quick. I mean, this political swing that we have going on until it balances out, if it ever balances out, you've got to be ready to move. It's just like we talk about with trying to get stuff done in DC. I mean, you sit around, next thing you know, it's May, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
and then next thing you know, we're into election season, and we haven't done anything to move the needle. Now we can't with CFPB, we can't say that this time because we were prepared and did a good job of leading up to this. But I think that's right. But I think that this tariff and all the other things, I mean, you're just sort of there's a lot of big questions right now.
Regardless of whether or not you're making your move right now, don't you need to start preparing for that move like yesterday? So if you're going to wait until the next 4 years, like let's say that you're going to wait and see what happens after Trump before you make a decision on what you're going to do. I mean, clearly, you're rolling the dice, right? Like there's a risk level that comes along with that. But it also feels like it's not the time to start your process. You need to start
No,
your process
Adam,
now if that's your target.
we tell people it's kind of our mantra. Like we see companies all the time that are just not ready to do something. We say, take the next 1 to 3 years, whether you work with us or somebody else, just get your house in order, get your stuff together because you don't know what's going to happen with your health, your life, whatever. But if you know your plan is you're going to be potentially going to be exiting in a few years, start doing it because time flies, just goes by. Before you know it, you're at 3 years, and then you haven't started it.
Yeah, and you're in the same position. You're starting over again, and you have a non-saleable company, or your company is worth significantly less than you expected it to be worth because you have not prepared appropriately or put all of the things in place. As we talk about valuations and all of that, one of my questions is the impact of like BPO services, for example. So in the TransUnion report last year, we said that it was 73% of debt buyers are using BPO services as an example. But how does that play into the impact of pricing when your organization is reliant on a third party to function?
It's a good question, Adam. I mean, they're on the debt buying side, right? There are companies that have lived in this industry for years and years and do it all internal. And now you've seen shifts with like PRA and others that have said, Done with that, let's go external. And they're ramping up their networks of agencies and law firms to handle their paper. I find during a heavily regulated environment, which we're coming out of, controlling your process from soup to nuts versus being heavily reliant on just one company doing your work out of India, let's say, has its risks, right? But also, I love the champion challenger concept, especially for this industry where you don't have just one vendor that you're beholden to. You've got 3 or 5, so you can get them. You have competition to help drive up performance and value. And so there's value creation there as well for the business when you're creating enterprise value to sell the company.
What about from an administrative perspective? Because we always look at like the third party service providers, as a debt buyer, for example, and saying, okay, our agencies and our law firms. But what about that like infrastructure, like mission critical infrastructure? Because we saw when we were having trouble hiring, let's call it 2020 through now, a lot of organizations had to move to using BPO services in order to expand their hiring geographic footprint. Now, with that expansion of the geographic footprint, how does that have an impact on how a buyer would look at your organization?
The buyers will be the buyers will tend to look at that and because if they can't hire the people at them, they have to have another solution. And if they're using an outside BPO to help them staff and do their back office work, they're going to say to themselves, great, if that's driving your EBITDA margin and you're becoming more profitable as a result, or you're lowering your cost to collect, it leads to a better number all in versus you trying to build it internally, screw it up, or have problems, and then you're losing more money or more values going out the door. So it can go that way.
Okay. So as we can kind of continue down the path of thinking about how we're evaluating these organizations, last year in the survey, we saw that the number one concern of debt collection companies was data security. So as you're like, David, from your perspective, as you're looking at a potential acquisition, are you going through like a technical evaluation as well? Are you doing penetration testing? Like, are you doing all of those external things if you're planning on, or is there a difference if you're planning on keeping that organization intact versus ingesting it
Yeah.
into a large?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're planning on keeping it intact, that's important, but I think that it would be hard to completely keep it intact and make it make sense. And I keep seeing this with other people and with us of like, all right, if you're gonna get the symmetry that you need in order to make it make sense, then your technologies are gonna need to line up. And one of the big components is data security for sure, and it's also one of the huge expenses that we have, and also one of the big reasons that I think a lot of this M&A is going to continue because you really need to be a certain size in order to be able to afford to do the things that you need to do for data security, for compliance, for all of that side of the house, and even in a more relaxed CFPB environment, which I mean we got all kind of extra time on our hands right now to look at other stuff because that's relaxed a little bit. But what hadn't relaxed is the people trying to get into our systems and all of the people that we have to block that and the security that we're using. So I think that's one of the main symmetries that really can help when you're looking at acquiring something, along with compliance and HR and um, other parts of IT and all of that.
Cybersecurity, data security matters. It really, really does. And it matters. There's been so many breaches that haven't even come out in the news yet that are going on in our industry that it's happening at the agency, debt buyer, law firm level, and the vendors that are supporting these companies. So there's going to become points where deals that have died over not having the right data security and because of concerns over things that were going to become trailing liabilities to the buyer by acquiring the company based on some of the things that they weren't doing. So it does matter, and it's something that needs to be evaluated as part of that process to make sure you have all your ducks in a row.
The CFPB, and rightfully so. I mean, when you're talking about your data, Michael mentioned it, but your attorney network is a huge place where you need to be paying attention. Place. I mean,
Huge.
they're
Yeah.
great at being attorneys and not real great at technology a lot of times. So you need to be looking at that and your other vendors, your technology vendors even. I mean,
Yeah, if you're working, David, like you're working for that small onesie twosie vendor that you've had a relationship, but you're sharing information with them, they're a potential hazard for you. It just there's so many different angles like that, Adam, that people are like, yeah, 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 I've got data security. And it doesn't work today.
Or they have some third party vendor who's coming in and checking their network
Checks
occasionally.
every couple of years to make sure they're no. Somebody was like, I have multi-factor authentication, I'm fine. I'm like, all right, well, look, I mean, if you think that's your only thing you're supposed to have, then I think you need to talk to some more consultants about it, because there's a lot more than that today in this industry.
Statement. I mean, look, a long time ago in a faraway place, auditing and writing policies and procedures, I remember an organization telling me all, like, they gave me all this documentation about the server. It turned out it was a PC in a closet. So, like, I mean, I feel like I've seen a lot of these things
I've
in
seen it.
action over time. But look, but that was a long time ago in a faraway place. The same kind of organization today is going to mostly be cloud based. I think a lot of us have moved off of the on premise. I mean, I'm in Florida. It makes zero sense for me to have anything on premise ever. It just is not our power is not that consistent.
But Adam, like, I'll tell you, I never thought 10, 15 years ago this industry would be like plagued with ransomware attacks and data breaches. Well, it is.
Yeah.
People want this subprime consumer data, whether they're collecting on, David, in your case, student loans, or they're collecting on buy now, pay later accounts. They want and will take this information and sell it and do whatever else they do with it.
Half of them aren't even looking for that particular data set. They're just looking for open doors. So they spend all of their time pinging the internet and trying to find open doors that they can walk through. And social engineering is the #1 version of attacks. For those of you that are watching, if you want to feel a little more paranoid about your life these days, there's a book by Kevin Mitnick called The Art of Deception, which is not even about technical hacks. It's just about how your receptionist let them in, and those kinds of things. I mean, it is quite that simple. Right? I mean, I call everybody before I send a wire transfer. I have to talk to them directly and know them, or I'm not sending that wire transfer, or at least to set up the rails initially, right? And that has just kind of been my approach to it. But in our last kind of 10 minutes here, guys, I wanted to just kind of run through and get your take on the Trump effect and how that's going to impact the mergers and acquisitions world in the debt collection industry. So clearly we've seen some changes at the CFPB. I mean, there's litigation around it and all of that, but we're going to see some changes there. But are we starting to feel and see that shift to the state level? And how is that going to impact the M&A world?
Well, Adam, I will just tell you, my big concern is fine, the CFPB, let's say staffing, they reduce their staffing, they're not doing as much. I feel like a lot of those people are going to get picked up by the states, right? And then the states are going to start ramping up different actions and enforcement on the space. And now you've got 13 or 15 states that are on your back versus just the federal government. I don't know where it's all going to go. I would tell you that from the A lens, the investors are happy that the CFPB may be taking more of a back seat when it comes to industries like this or debt settlement. They want to see them take a back seat because one of the biggest costs after payroll for these companies is compliance. It's been like that for years. And if that can get reduced and David doesn't have to do as much on the compliance side that he's doing today to maintain everything, that's going to help drive more margin and attract more people to the industry. So I think that piece of it could be helpful. Also, medical. Last year, there wasn't a lot of deal activity for medical collections because of the credit reporting rule and everything like that. As this thing rolls out with Trump and he gets easier or shows that they're not going to be focused on that, that could help on the healthcare rev cycle and collection side of the table too.
And look, if you're a medical shop that was told there's way too much questions right now for your company to have much value, well, that's changed. And now's the time to start looking, like we said before, because it could change again quickly, you know, right while the iron's hot, so to speak. I think on the state thing, Adam, having had pretty detailed experience with the CFPB over the last 4 years, it's going to take a whole lot of resource and time and money for states to be able to get to the point where the CFPB was. And I'm not suggesting that certain states aren't going to be problematic, but the unlimited financial resources the CFPB had, what they were paying these people to come in and audit and do all the things that they were doing, I think that states just don't have that resource. I mean, our state audits that we've seen so far, or that we've always gone through, have really, for the most part, been about consumer protection, right? They're looking for problems with consumer protection as opposed to this
Camping
just
out for months to try and find a
outrage.
problem.
Yeah, this outrageous just needle in the haystack and just like,
Right.
wanting to pin you down,
If a
right?
cop follows you long enough, they're going to pull you over for something, right? Like there's
Yeah.
always going to be something that comes to the forefront. And so I think by having them implanted in offices for extended periods of time, of course, they're going to find something or they're going to make up some new rule. I think the state's not having that capability. But what does scare me from a state perspective, I don't think is necessarily the regulators, but the legislators, because those legislators get hot on something that they don't necessarily understand at the state level. They don't understand the unintended consequences or how that's going to impact those consumers that are, let's call it cross state, living in multiple places, moving back and forth, whatever the case may be. And it can create a lot of challenges that are just unintended consequences.
No doubt.
And we have to keep working on that. I mean, we do it as an entire industry. I'm extremely proud of what ACA has been able to do recently on that note. Just I've been more intimately involved on that side. I mean, you have to keep fighting. And like when there's something comes up, you get in touch with people that understand, how we fought medical debt credit reporting in this state because now we need to do it in this state. So don't and that, and agencies that are in multiple states need to be helping and paying attention to, not just
Yeah,
go.
but David, you do a great job of getting in front of your legislators and your state and everything else. I mean, more of the agencies, the vendors, they got to do the same in their states too. They got to hear about our issues and concerns. It's the only way it gets brought up because they hear from people that are on the ground.
Sounds like a plug for the ACA Washington Insights event happening in early June, where it's time to get out there and do the work, right? It's time for us to build those relationships. And even though I've heard those rumblings of, oh, it's not as important right now. No, it's exponentially more important right now because you don't build relationships and you don't have any credibility when there's something on the line. So building those relationships now when there is not as much on the line is infinitely more important.
And I mean, I know we're running out of time, but I've said it 1,000 times. You build the relationship and you see the relationship through the good times and the bad. And you are work with people to become your friends that are able to help you in your state. They might end up in DC. There's people in DC that might go from House to Senate. There's all of this stuff. And it's really, really important. And the more of us that are doing it, the better off it's going to be. So which
So
helps him.
yeah, fair enough. So final question for you guys, as we're kind of winding out our time here, is any predictions for the next 18 to 24 months on how the market might move from an M&A perspective?
Adam, I think you're going to see a lot of volatility in the next few months. I think all the stuff that's going on with the tariffs is not going to get solved. The stock market's going to go up and down until we reach kind of a steady state of normalcy. Trump is really good at creating a lot of volatility and change for negotiation and everything that he's trying to accomplish globally. But there's also what the day-to-day consumer is going to experience. And I think we got inflation, we have other dynamics that are here that are going to affect the consumer and also start eating away at the business too from their profitability. So I do think this year was expected to be a big A year. The tariffs, I think, have changed that a bit. So I think that it may be a bit slower, but I still think you're going to see a pretty strong year for deal activity over the next 12 months.
And in my opinion, it's a perfect time to get your business in shape while all this extra stuff's going on, to be able to look at, do you want to acquire? Do you want to look at selling? Because I really feel like 26 and potentially 27 could be really big years for this, because we also have, what doesn't stop moving is this rapid technology change that is taking place that either people are going to have to do or they're going to have to find somebody to do for them.
Well, gentlemen, I really appreciate your insights. I hope that you will come back again. Maybe we can make this an annual thing and we can talk about what's going on again in 2026 as the mergers and acquisitions market continues to adjust itself based on all of these external factors, tariffs, Trump, all these other things that are happening right now. But can't appreciate you guys enough for coming on and sharing your insights today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Great job.
We greatly appreciate you. For those of you watching, you can leave comments out here on LinkedIn or on YouTube when we post the replay later this week, and we'll be responding to those. But I really want to thank everybody for your time and attention today. We'll see you all again soon.